The rain fell in heavy sheets, drenching the empty streets, but it wasn't the storm that rattled her bones. It was the desperation in his eyes. The German shepherd stood on the pavement, soaked through, his fur matted with the downpour. His body quivered, his legs unsteady as he limped toward the little girl standing a few feet away. She was just 7, barely tall enough to see over the top of the park bench, but there was something in her face, something that stopped her from running away. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and curiosity, her small hands trembling as they clasped each other, instinctively drawn to him. He stopped at her feet, and without thinking, she crouched down, her face softening as she took in the sight of the injured animal. But what struck her most were his eyes, wide, pleading, as if he was trying to speak, begging for help that he could not ask for. Her breath caught in her throat as she reached out, her fingers brushing his, and for the briefest moment, time seemed to stop. A soft whimper escaped from the dog's throat, a sound full of anguish and desperation. She flinched but didn't pull back. She couldn't. Something in her heart understood. But she had no idea that by helping this dog, she was about to alter both their fates in ways no one could have predicted. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm that would follow, the consequences that would forever change the course of their lives. Show your love. Hit like, share, and subscribe for more. The park was empty, save for the steady hum of the wind and the soft rustle of leaves clinging to wet branches. Lily had always loved this park. The towering oaks, the scent of damp earth in the air, the way the sunlight would peek through the trees in the late afternoon, casting long shadows on the ground. But today, the air felt different. The usual quiet comfort had been replaced by an unfamiliar weight, a heaviness that seemed to settle into the air like a storm on the horizon. It wasn't the kind of day to be outside. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still soggy, the grass flattened and wet from the storm. Lily pulled her jacket tightly around her body as she walked along the edge of the park, her boots making soft squelching sounds with each step. She hadn't meant to wander this far, but somehow her feet had taken her away from the playground, away from the other children. She couldn't explain why, but something inside her had drawn her to this part of the park, to the quiet, deserted part where the trees crowded close together, casting shadows that felt like secrets. Her mind wasn't focused on the path ahead, not on the emptiness that surrounded her. She was thinking about school, about the argument she'd had with her best friend, about how she felt like an outsider in her own world lately. She hadn't meant to get upset over something so small, but the fight had left a lingering bitterness in her chest. The sound of her friend's laughter felt distant now, as though it belonged to someone else. She didn't belong in their world today, and so here she was, alone wandering through a park that had never seemed so distant before. It was then that she saw him. At first, she thought it was just a shadow, a trick of the light, but as she stepped closer, she realized it wasn't. A dog, no, a German shepherd, was lying on the ground near the park bench, its body stiff, its head down as though exhausted, its fur matted with rain. The dog didn't move when Lily approached, but she could hear its labored breathing, shallow and strained. Her steps slowed, her heart beating faster in her chest. She had always loved animals, but she had never seen one like this. This dog wasn't just tired, it was hurt. Her breath caught as she stopped a few feet away from him. The dog's eyes, though half closed, seemed to follow her every movement. They were wide, pleading, as if calling out to her without words. There was pain in those eyes, but also something else, something softer, something that made Lily's heart ache in a way she couldn't explain. It was a look she'd seen in people before, in those moments of vulnerability when someone was too afraid to ask for help but needed it more than anything. This dog needed help. She crouched down slowly, her hand reaching out instinctively. "Hey," she whispered softly, her voice trembling. "Are you okay?" The dog didn't move, but its eyes shifted toward her, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw a flicker of recognition in them. An understanding that they weren't alone, that someone cared. Lily's fingers hovered just above the dog's head, unsure whether to touch him. She had always been taught to be cautious around stray animals, to avoid them when they seemed hurt or dangerous. But there was something in his eyes, something in the way he was looking at her, that made her hesitate. She couldn't walk away. Not now. Her fingers brushed his fur, and the dog's body flinched slightly, as if startled by her touch. But then, instead of pulling away, he relaxed into her hand, the tension in his body slowly ebbing away. His fur was soaked, cold to the touch, but under the wetness, she could feel the warmth of his skin. His body trembled, but it wasn't from the cold. It was from something deeper, something more desperate. She didn't know what to do. Her first instinct was to call for help, to find an adult, but she couldn't bear the thought of leaving him alone. She crouched down lower, gently running her hand through his fur, feeling the sharpness of his ribs beneath the skin. He was too thin, far too thin for a dog of his size. His breathing, shallow and uneven, seemed to falter whenever he tried to lift his head, his eyes growing more distant. "Please don't leave me," she whispered, more to herself than to the dog. She didn't know why she said it, but the words escaped her before she could stop them. There was something about the dog, something in his eyes that made her believe, no, feel, that if she didn't help him, he wouldn't make it. She didn't understand why she felt this way, why it mattered so much, but she couldn't ignore the urgency in her chest. Her heart raced as she glanced around the park. There was no one in sight. Her mind began to spin, trying to think of what to do, what steps she could take to help. Should she run to the nearest house? Should she call animal control? But there was no time to waste. Lily pressed her palm against the dog's side, feeling the soft rise and fall of his chest. His body was still warm, still alive, but barely. She could hear the faint sound of his whimpers, soft and strained, as though he was struggling to hold on to something. Hope, maybe. She didn't know if he was capable of feeling hope anymore, not after what had clearly happened to him. But she couldn't stop herself from wishing that somehow, in this moment, she could be the one to give it back to him. With trembling hands, Lily gently stroked his fur again. She could feel the tremors in his body, the faintest pulse of life still running through him. His eyes flickered open, focusing on her for a moment, and in that split second, Lily saw it. Recognition. He was still there, still alive. Lily bit her lip, her chest tightening. "I won't leave you," she said quietly, her voice a fragile promise. "I'll get you help." And with that, the rain seemed to quiet, the world around her fading into the background. The only thing that mattered was the dog, the bond that was already beginning to form between them, a bond that was stronger than the weight of the world around them. In that moment, Lily knew one thing for sure. She was not going to leave him. No matter what it took, she was going to help him. The house felt smaller with the dog in it. It was as though the walls were closing in, too many unspoken questions hanging in the air. Lily hadn't planned on bringing the dog home. She hadn't even known if she could. But now, with his trembling body curled up on the living room rug, exhausted and broken, there was no turning back. The weight of the responsibility hit her all at once, overwhelming her with a mixture of fear and determination. She had made a choice, and now she had to see it through. Lily crouched beside him, her fingers gently brushing through his soaked fur, her mind racing with uncertainty. What if her parents didn't let him stay? What if he couldn't survive the night? The rain had stopped, but the chill in the air lingered, and she could feel his body shiver under her touch. His labored breathing was the only sound in the room, the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest the only proof that he was still holding on. She had told him she wouldn't leave him, and she meant it, but she couldn't do this alone. Lily stood up, her legs stiff from kneeling for so long. Her gaze moved to the kitchen, where her mother was washing dishes, humming softly to herself as she worked. Lily hesitated for a moment, biting her lip. Her mother had always been practical, always focused on the things that needed to be done. She didn't understand how it felt to connect with an animal, to feel that deep sense of responsibility, to know that without her, this dog might not survive. But when Lily had first entered the house with the German shepherd, her mother's face had softened, her eyes taking in the injured animal with a mixture of concern and surprise. At first, Lily thought she would say no, tell her it was too dangerous, too risky to bring in a dog they didn't know. But instead, her mother had sighed, a reluctant smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "You know we can't keep him, right?" her mother had said, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her voice soft but firm. "I know," Lily had replied, her heart sinking. She hadn't expected her mother to welcome the dog with open arms. She just needed to know that they would help him, that they wouldn't leave him to suffer. "Let's get him cleaned up first," her mother had added, nodding toward the dog. "Then we'll see." The words felt like a lifeline. The small flicker of hope Lily had been holding onto had grown brighter in that instant. For the first time since she found him in the park, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this. Now, standing in the kitchen, Lily's heart pounded as she watched her mother rinse off the last dish. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't keep him in the living room all night, cold and alone. The dog needed medical attention, and Lily couldn't wait any longer. "Mom," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "can you help him? Please, he needs a vet." Her mother paused, looking at her over her shoulder. There was a pause, a silence that stretched between them like a tightrope, and for a moment, Lily wasn't sure if her mother was going to refuse. Her mother set the dish down carefully, wiping her hands before she turned to face Lily fully. She studied her daughter's face, eyes softening, before sighing and nodding. "All right, sweetie. We'll take him to the vet. But we're doing it my way, okay? No rushing into things." Lily's heart soared with relief. "Okay," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek, though she couldn't explain why. She wasn't sure if it was the weight of the decision or the relief of being understood, but the flood of emotion was overwhelming. She stepped forward, kneeling beside the dog again, her hand resting gently on his side. The dog, still weak, looked up at her, his eyes reflecting gratitude, though it was hard to tell whether he even understood what was happening. His body still trembled, but the quiet whimper that escaped his throat seemed like a sound of comfort, of knowing he wasn't alone anymore. For the first time since Lily found him, she saw a flicker of peace in his eyes, something less desperate, something that suggested he was finally beginning to trust. "We're going to make it through this," Lily whispered to him, her voice barely above a breath. She didn't know if he could hear her, but it didn't matter. She meant it for both of them. Her mother returned from the closet a few minutes later with an old blanket, one of Lily's old ones, soft and familiar, and wrapped it around the dog. Lily carefully helped her mother lift him, and they made their way out to the car. The ride to the vet was quiet, filled only by the soft whimpering of the dog in the back seat. Lily sat next to him, her hand resting on his side, offering what little comfort she could. When they arrived, the vet took one look at the dog and ushered them inside, immediately getting to work. Lily stayed by his side as the vet gently checked his legs, his chest and his sides, assessing the extent of his injuries. It was a brutal sight. Max's body had been battered, his leg injured, his ribs bruised, and there was a deep, unsettling wariness in his eyes. His body had been through more than any animal should have to endure. But it was his eyes, those eyes that Lily couldn't shake. The raw, primal fear she had seen in the park still lingered in them. There was something about the dog, something deep within him, that made her feel like she was witnessing a part of history unfolding, something that no one could have prepared for. She was not just helping a stray dog, she was witnessing the remnants of a life left behind, discarded and forgotten. Max's life was not as simple as she had imagined. He wasn't just an injured dog. He was a survivor of something far greater, something far darker. The vet confirmed her suspicions. This dog had been through military training, likely part of a special canine unit, trained for high-risk operations. The wounds he had sustained weren't from an accident or neglect. They were from the harshness of a life that had never given him the chance to heal. "You're lucky he made it this far," the vet said quietly, as Lily sat beside Max, her hand gently stroking his fur. "Most dogs don't survive what he's been through. His mind and body have taken a beating. But I think with care, we can help him." Lily's heart swelled with a mixture of sadness and determination. The tears that had been threatening all day finally began to fall. They weren't just for the dog, but for herself as well. For the connection they had shared, for the bond they had forged in the quiet moments at the park. Max was not just an injured animal. He was a broken soul, one that needed her as much as she needed him. She wiped her eyes and leaned closer to Max, her voice soft and steady. "We're going to get through this together, I promise." The days that followed blurred together in a whirlwind of veterinary visits, quiet nights at home, and late conversations between Lily and her parents. Max's recovery was slow but steady. Every morning, Lily would sit beside him as he ate, gently coaxing him to drink the water he refused to touch the day before. Slowly, the dog began to regain some strength, though his body still showed the scars of his past, bruises, cuts, and the way he limped when he moved. But the most profound scars, the ones that seemed to haunt him, weren't visible. They were deep within, embedded in the way he reacted to sudden movements, or how his eyes would widen when someone raised their voice. Lily couldn't help but notice the strange, almost unnatural intelligence in his gaze. It wasn't just the way he watched her. It was the way he studied the world around him, always alert, always cautious. He was a creature on high alert, like a soldier in the middle of a battlefield, never fully at ease. One evening, as the light from the setting sun filtered through the window, Lily sat beside him, gently brushing his fur. Max had been more responsive lately, leaning into her touch, his body relaxing with every stroke. The bond between them had grown deeper, and Lily had begun to feel as though they were connected by something unspoken. Something she couldn't fully comprehend, but could feel in every beat of her heart. She had saved him, yes, but he had also saved her. There was a quiet understanding between them, a silent promise that whatever had happened in the past, they were moving forward together. Her parents had warmed up to the idea of keeping Max, though they still didn't fully understand his history. They were just glad he was no longer the trembling wreck he had been when they first found him. But Lily couldn't stop thinking about the things she didn't know, the things Max had never told her. There was too much mystery in his eyes, too much silence when it came to his past. It was as if he was hiding a part of himself, some secret buried too deep to uncover. One evening after dinner, as Lily sat at the kitchen table, she overheard a conversation between her mother and father in the other room. They thought she wasn't listening, but her ears caught the fragments of their words. She didn't know what had prompted it, but her mother had asked about the dog's background, her voice filled with concern. "You know," her mother said, "he's not like any dog we've had before. His behavior, it's strange. I've seen dogs with PTSD, but this is something else." "I know," her father replied. "It's like he's seen things no animal should have to see. And his body, those injuries, they're not from a normal life. This isn't just some stray dog we've found." Lily's heart raced as she listened, her eyes wide. She had never heard her parents speak about Max in this way. There was a tension in their voices, an undertone of unease that she hadn't noticed before. They were right. There was something wrong with Max, something deeper than just physical injury. And now, for the first time, Lily felt a growing sense of urgency. What had happened to him? Why was he so different? The conversation turned quieter, and Lily, unable to contain her curiosity any longer, slipped quietly from her seat and crept toward the hallway, her bare feet making no sound against the cool floor. She peeked around the corner of the kitchen doorway, trying to catch the rest of their conversation. Her mother's voice lowered even further. "I looked him up," she said softly. "I found some records. He wasn't just some stray. He's trained. I think he was part of a K9 unit, a special one." The words hit Lily like a punch to the stomach. K9 unit. Special. She couldn't breathe for a moment, her heart thundering in her chest. She didn't know what that meant, what it meant for Max, for them. But she knew it was significant. It explained the way he carried himself, the quiet intelligence in his eyes, the strange behavior that hadn't made sense until now. But it also made her afraid. What had Max been through? What kind of life had he led before he ended up in the park, broken and alone? Her father's voice broke through her thoughts. "We need to be careful, though. If he's part of a military unit, if he's been trained for combat, There's no telling what kind of trauma he's carrying. And I'm not sure I want to know what kind of people would let him end up like this." Lily felt the weight of their words sinking into her, her body frozen in the hallway. She knew her parents didn't fully understand, not like she did. Max wasn't just a dog who needed help. He was a survivor. He had been trained, molded for a life that none of them could imagine. And now he was here with her, trying to put the pieces of his broken life back together. She needed to know more. She needed to understand the truth. But as she quietly returned to the living room, where Max lay resting by the window, she felt a cold knot form in her stomach. The love she felt for him, the bond they shared, suddenly seemed so fragile. What if there was more to his past than she could handle? What if there was something darker buried inside him, something that would change everything? Max looked up at her then, his eyes following her every movement. His gaze seemed different now, almost knowing, as if he understood the weight of the decision she had to make. He didn't move, didn't whimper, just sat there, watching her with an intensity that made her heart ache. She reached down and gently stroked his fur, the soft fur that had once been matted with blood and dirt, now clean and warm beneath her touch. "You're not just a dog, are you?" she whispered, the words slipping from her mouth before she even realized it. "You've been through something I can't even imagine." Max's eyes met hers, and for a moment, it felt like they were communicating without words, his silent plea to understand, to be loved despite the scars he carried. Lily knew then that she would do whatever it took to help him, to understand him. She had to. But she also knew that in order to help him, she had to face the truth. All of it. No matter how dark, how dangerous it might be. She couldn't keep running from the mystery of his past. She couldn't keep pretending it didn't matter. "Don't worry," she said softly, as Max leaned into her hand, his breathing steady. "I won't leave you. We'll face it together." Max's eyes softened, his body relaxing beneath her touch. And in that moment, Lily knew that whatever lay ahead, they would both have to confront the past. But together they could find a way to heal, whatever the cost. The house had become quieter in the days that followed, each one marked by a delicate stillness. The air felt heavier, weighed down by the growing uncertainty of what would come next. Max had begun to show subtle signs of improvement. His wounds were healing, his movements less stiff, and his energy, though still fragile, seemed to be returning in small bursts. But with each small victory, there was a shadow that lingered, something unspoken that hung over Lily and her family. Max's behavior, his fear, his sudden moments of unease, had not fully dissipated. There was still something about him that felt distant, unreachable, as if he was hiding something from them. Lily spent hours with him each day, quietly reading to him or sitting beside him in silence. The connection they shared had deepened, but so had the questions in her heart. She had learned the basics of his past. He had been part of a specialized K-9 unit, trained for high-risk missions, and discarded when he was no longer deemed useful. But there was still so much that didn't make sense. Why had he been abandoned in the park? What had happened during those missions? And what was the darkness that clung to him, the things he wasn't saying? Her mind circled around the unknown like a ravenous animal, gnawing at her thoughts. And the more she tried to understand him, the more the distance between them seemed to grow. The bond they had formed felt fragile, as if any sudden movement, any mistake, could shatter it entirely. One rainy afternoon, as Lily sat beside Max, stroking his fur absent-mindedly, she noticed something different. He was tense, his body rigid, his eyes fixed on the door. He hadn't reacted like this before. Lily's hand froze mid-stroke as she followed his gaze. The house was silent, the sound of rain against the windows the only thing breaking the stillness. But there was something in the air, a presence that made Lily's heart race with unease. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she strained to hear. The doorbell rang, slicing through the silence like a knife. Max's body went completely still. His ears flattened, his breathing shallow, and for the first time since she had brought him home, Lily saw true fear in his eyes. She instinctively moved to comfort him, but something held her back. The unease in his posture, the way his muscles tightened as if preparing to flee, made her hesitate. The doorbell rang again, followed by a knock, this time persistent and firm. Lily's stomach twisted, a cold shiver running down her spine. She had never seen Max react this way before, not with such intensity. He wasn't just nervous, he was panicked. "I'll go check it out," she said softly, her voice trembling more than she intended. She stood, taking a step toward the door, but Max's whimpers stopped her in her tracks. His body, though still, was trembling, his eyes wide with terror. "Max," she whispered, kneeling beside him again. "What is it? What's wrong?" The dog didn't answer, but his reaction was enough. He was terrified. He had been through something so traumatic that even the sound of a doorbell, something so ordinary, sent him into a state of sheer panic. And for the first time, Lily understood. She understood that there were things buried deep within him that had nothing to do with his injuries. His past was far darker than she had realized. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. The knock at the door came again, louder this time, and Max reacted once more, his body bracing, his eyes fixed on the entrance. It wasn't the weather, it wasn't the noise, it was something else, something he feared. "Stay," she whispered, her voice a steady, reassuring whisper, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to comfort, Max or herself. She stood up slowly, moving toward the door. The moment her hand touched the doorknob, she felt Max's eyes on her. His gaze was pleading, desperate, as though he knew something she didn't. The door swung open, and there, standing on the porch, were two figures. The first was a man in his late 40s, his expression grim and focused, wearing a black jacket and a badge clipped to his belt. The woman beside him was younger, with dark hair and a stern face, her arms crossed over her chest. She stepped forward before Lily could say anything, her eyes scanning the house as if searching for something. The man stepped in behind her, his gaze trained on Max, who had stiffened at the sound of their voices. "You must be the family who took him in," the woman said, her voice cool, professional. There was no warmth in her tone, no acknowledgement of what Lily had done. Just cold, distant professionalism. Lily stood frozen in the doorway, her heart hammering in her chest. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice low, though the words felt foreign on her tongue. She hadn't expected anyone to show up, especially not like this. The man stepped forward, his gaze locked on Max. "We're here for the dog," he said, his words heavy with finality. "He's property of the government. You've taken something that doesn't belong to you." Lily's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean, property of the government?" she asked, her voice rising. Max whined behind her, his eyes fixed on the men, the panic in his body growing. The man didn't flinch. "He's a military asset. He's been through special training, and when his mission ended, he was to be put down. He wasn't supposed to be alive." The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of something Lily couldn't quite grasp. "You want him back?" Her voice was a whisper now, her body shaking with disbelief. "You want to take him away?" The man nodded. "Yes, it's a matter of national security." Lily felt her world tilt. She looked back at Max, who was now pacing restlessly behind her, his body trembling in fear. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Max wasn't just some stray dog. He wasn't a simple rescue. He was part of something far bigger, something that she couldn't even begin to comprehend. He had been trained for war, for something no animal should ever have to endure. "I won't let you take him," Lily said, the words slipping out of her mouth before she could stop them. She wasn't sure where this sudden surge of defiance had come from, but she felt it coursing through her veins, making her heart pound. The woman's face softened slightly. "I understand your feelings, but this isn't a choice. We need him back." Lily stepped in front of Max, her hand placed protectively over his head, as if she could shield him from the world that had brought him to this moment. She wasn't sure how, or even why, but in that instant, she knew she couldn't let them take him. Not now. Not after everything they had been through together. "You don't understand," she said, her voice more confident now, despite the trembling of her hands. "He's not just some weapon. He's my friend. He needs me." The man's face hardened, but Lily didn't care. She wasn't going to back down. Not this time. Max whimpered behind her, his body trembling. But Lily knew she couldn't let him face this alone. She couldn't let anyone take him away again. The weight of the moment hung heavily in the air, suffocating the space between Lily and the government agents. The harsh words they spoke were cold, logical, but they fell like stones, crushing the fragile bond she had formed with Max. Every instinct in her screamed to protect him, to shelter him from a past that had been too brutal for any living creature. But here, in front of her, stood a cruel reminder of the system that had trained him to be more weapon than animal. Her heart ached with the knowledge that the world didn't see him as the dog she had come to love, the one who had shown nothing but trust and loyalty despite the horrors he had endured. He was still just property, something they were ready to reclaim and discard once again. Max, standing behind her, was no longer trembling. His body was still, his breathing shallow but steady. His eyes, once filled with terror, were now fixed on Lily, seeking something from her. Comfort, certainty, perhaps even hope. But the truth was too large to ignore. She couldn't protect him from everything. She couldn't shield him from the life he had left behind. And the moment had come where she had to choose between keeping him by her side or letting him go to fulfill a mission that wasn't his to begin with. Lily stood there, her hand still resting on Max's fur, her heart heavy with the knowledge that love was sometimes about letting go. She knew he didn't belong in their world anymore. The dog that had entered her life was no longer just a pet. He was a survivor, a warrior caught between two worlds, neither of which understood his worth. And in this moment, she had to set him free. "I'll never forget you," she whispered to him, her voice shaking but resolute. "You're free now." Max's eyes met hers one last time, as if understanding. He nudged her hand gently, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade away. The love they shared, forged in the silence of brokenness, would live on, even as they parted ways. The agents moved toward him, and with one last look at Lily, Max walked toward them, his steps heavy but determined. He didn't look back. Not once. Lily stood there, watching him leave, her heart breaking, knowing that sometimes the hardest thing to do for someone you love is to let them go.